Hey guys, welcome back to this week's regularly scheduled Path to Building Rambling, and today I want to talk about Whisperer. So just to quickly get out of the way, this video is going to have a lot less builds than the previous ones just because I haven't really had that much time with GG releasing these ascendancies so fast. I have not had time to make a ton of builds or even investigate the ascendancies that I'm like super interested in still. So yeah, that is my quick excuse, and they are not leaks. The two builds that I have in the video for this are not super leak start friendly just because I think this ascendancy really shines with a couple different build enabling uniques. Thankfully, Ranger has two ascendancies that are very good at league start in Daughter of Ashabi and Servant of Arakali, which in PoE 1 you are allowed to change your ascendancy on like later on, unlike certain sequels. Anyways, so with all that out of the way, I am really excited for this ascendancy. I can't express how I'm probably most excited for this ascendancy out of all the ones I've seen before because, unlike I assume most people, I have tried to make a big mana attack build every single league since I started playing PoE. Probably multiple times every league, if we're being honest. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. It kind of just depends on the balance. But like previously, like in 3.24, I played like a big mana Venom Gyre Deadeye in Hardcore. I was built around Mana Storm, which you could certainly do on the Ascendancy, but I essentially try to do something like that every single league because this archetype is really interesting to me because when you have a ton of mana, getting to leech it all back is just so powerful. It's just like I don't know. I mean, like normally, like you can get just like really inflated mana pools, unlike you can with life. But like you get to scale your damage off of it. You get to leech it back like instantly. I don't know. There's something about it. I just really enjoy. Anyways, this ascendancy to me pretty much screams big mana attacks because like obviously increased mana cost skills attacks have added lightning damage equal to 4% of max mana, which is like 2/3 of a Mind of the Console, and you can add this with Mind of the Console to get 10% of your max mana added as lightning. And then this node right here is very fucked up. It's one of the things that makes Wanders so good in the current state of PoE, where Wanders were so bad for so long. But this effect used to cause like one of the highest DPS builds in the game, which was Manaforged using Indigon to abuse this to get really big inflated mana costs, which would then increase mana because that's what Indigon does. Increases your mana cost, increases spell damage as your mana costs go up. This effect is also on Crown of the Eyes. It's kind of weird. This ascendancy has two really good effects that are essentially really good build around unique helmets in Crown of Eyes and Mind of the Council. And on top of that, you also get this really good mana scaling. So Ranger, believe it or not, actually has really good mana nodes at her start, like right around that section, and then up in Scion there's even more mana nodes. There's actually a ton of really good mana nodes under Duelist, especially if you use Healthy Mind to convert the life over there. But essentially you have really good mana already as a Ranger. I've played plenty of big mana Ranger builds over the years. And this node right here, where it converts your dexterity to give you +1 max mana per dexterity, that is twice as good as intelligence because intelligence gives you, for every 2 intelligence, you get 1 max mana. So this is just 1-to-1, which is crazy because there is a ton of dexterity, obviously, in the Ranger section. So you're going to see very big mana pools on builds that are using these kind of setups. There's obviously other very good nodes, like this is obviously incredible. And then this is just so good for clear, but there are skills that scale really well off of fork, or like kind of, I don't want to say need to use fork, but just work much better by actually getting to use fork. Like I'm thinking of Kinetic Blast of Clustering works this way, but also obviously Venom Gyre. I would pretty much never play Venom Gyre without fork just because the way Venom Gyre works is when you attack, it hits an enemy, splits into 2 from the fork, and then those get returned to you and you catch those projectiles. So it just makes it way easier to use Whirling Blaze to blast out all of your projectiles because fork essentially doubles them. And this, when you hit an enemy, you're going to create 3 projectiles that fork out, you're going to catch 3. So every one enemy you hit, you're going to create 3 forking projectiles. So you're just going to have like really high max stacks of projectiles if you play like Venom Gyre or something like this. This obviously just really good defensively. There's pretty much no bad node here. This one you can kind of get by a rare implicit on gloves, but if you're using unique gloves like Doedri's Tenure, which work really well with this node, you might have a more difficult time getting rage, in which case this node's pretty good. This node's good, it's just I hate having to hit Mana Flask. So anyways, on to discussing builds. So as you could probably imagine from me gushing about Venom Gyre, that's what I'm most excited to talk about. Like again, full disclosure, this tree is kind of shit right now. Way too high level, using way too many uniques, and just various things like that. It just needs more time in the oven, you know. But there's still some really cool stuff here that I want to talk about. Like in particular on this setup, So if you're playing a build that is stacking tons of mana, and like that's pretty much like as your like only stat that you really care about in decks, you're going to be really light on increases to damage, which like crit builds end up like this like a lot of times. Poison builds end up like this where you just lack big source of increased damage. So any amounts you can get are very big, like very good for you. And so your Mind is Destroyed, this node right here, is actually kind of incredible for this build because if you look, like Iron Will, 10% damage there. And since we have a decent amount of life, Wrathpith is giving us 55% more damage. And that's because if you look at our increased damage on our Venom Gyre, that Wrathpith plus Iron Will alone is 400% increased damage. I'm actually surprised we have that much extra elsewhere, but we're only taking efficient sources of it because if you look at our tree, it's literally all mana, dex, like more multiplier. And then this is, we're not actually intentionally taking this for Dana. I just want to automate our power charges and then get another projectile so I don't have to use GMP with Venom Gyre. Taking crit here, suppression, life, leech, tincture, sustain, suppression. Oh, here's some damage. And then this is just to get resistance flip, mana, life, mana, mom. So as you can see, getting those big efficient sources of that with that node is like kind of awesome. You can, if you don't have Wrathpith, you can also use Harmonic Spirit Shield. You lose a lot of damage on it, but you do get some quality life, and you can, quality of life, and you can get some extra nice to have stats like suppression, potentially ailment avoidance. You can get a bunch of flat life here as well. So Wrathpith is not the only required way to do this. It's just such an efficient source of it. And since we're not triggering spells a ton and we're not a spellcaster, we don't really get this downside. You would eventually if you want to use Whirling Blades to like do like cast on crit like Tornado, which should help you get more hits with or more cop projectiles with Venom Gyre. I'm not 100% positive on that, so don't quote me. But you know, long story short, there are things you could do. I guess Sniper's Mark is triggered, but that's not triggered enough for that to actually affect us. We have so much leech. Other uniques I want to talk about, Mind of the Council. Like I mentioned, this stacks additively with our Ascendancy for the 4% of max lightning as, or mana as lightning. So we have 10% of our mana is converted to lightning, which right now is 9,000, which I don't want to do the math because I'm going to sound like a dumbass. So, oh, well, that's actually just easy. It's just 900 because I just moved the 0. But anyways, yeah, so that is a shit ton of flat lightning. And we also get a ton of flat lightning from Arcane Cloak. And as you can see, Arcane Cloak actually has pretty decent uptime. If we go look, where's our uptime? 71%, because we are intentionally taking, like these nodes are good anyway, but also taking this to increase the cooldown of it. Ideally, we could have even like another, there's no other duration support we would use it. You can pick up more if you want to cut something to get more duration here, because Arcane Cloak uptime is incredible for your defenses, but also for your offense. We have so much flat that this sigil power actually gives us like almost no damage, which is funny because normally this is one of the biggest parts of damage for big mana attack builds. I want this mostly for the defense. Even if I crank this up to like, let's say like 21, see it's only 4%, so that max value, that's like 16% more damage at max level, which is it's kind of wild. Since we have so much flat lightning from like our Ascendancy and then from Arcane Cloak, what's kind of funny is if you look at our weapon, you don't actually even need this value on it at all. Like our claws is quite good, but as you can see, this is 7% of our damage. So you don't even really need damage on this. The reason I actually have flat lightning on this is a little unintuitive. It's not so much for the damage. It's because when all of your buffs are down, it is going to feel just like a little bit bad. Like we lose 80% of our damage by having Arcane Cloak. Like, so for example, let's say Arcane Cloak is down. We lose like a shit ton of our damage, right? So I'd be a little concerned with clear if you don't have flat here, but honestly, normally Mind of the Council is like close enough, and since we get another 4% from Ascendancy, and you have way more mana than these builds normally have, maybe you really don't need the flat lightning there. Like there are better mods you can have. I was just a little concerned about clear is why I have the flat there. Like for example, if we go back to our claw, do I not have pen on it yet? I do not. Like this I know will be better just without even having to just know. Yep. Very, very slightly better, like 2% more. Like, yeah, pen is going to be a little bit better. But I guess that's the only thing that you really need here is like, it's funny that claws get mana because it's so good for this. Like you want the flat mana like crazy, right? But you really just want crit, attack speed, flat mana, and then the rest honestly are crafted mods because you can't get them. Like you want spell damage and pen. Because again, this spell damage is doing double effect because we have that 150% value. So even though it's only 48% there, it's, what is that, 72 actually, because of it gets applied to us at 1.5 effect. And then that 4% of chaos is pretty funny. It's very slightly better than the normal spell damage mod, but it gives us a shit ton of chaos because how much lightning we actually have. So, yeah, I think that's mostly it for the uniques. The only other ones is like Gruthkin's Flight is just like an early thing. You would definitely replace this later on with like some Tailwind elusive monstrosity boots with Awakener's Orb. That's pretty easy to make actually for what it's worth. But anyways, these are just giving us a ton of life because we are stacking decks. These are like Hollow Palm builds will typically use these because they end up stacking so much decks, they end up with like very little life. And that's pretty true here, honestly, too. But later on, I think you can replace these because we have a pretty big hit pool between our ES, our big mana, and like a 3,700 life is really not that bad. And we have this much mana in ES, so you can replace these later on. It might actually be better early just because of resistances. Astramentus, I'm sure you guys aren't sick of this at all in PoE 2, but PoE 1, Astramentus is actually not that hard to beat later on. It takes like quite a bit of currency, like especially if you're SSF, but later on you could get like something like 100 dex, mana, crit multi, and just like other nice to have stats, like either resistances or increased ES, increased evasion, increased. I guess that's mostly all of it. That stuff I want to talk about. Like, anyways, you can beat Astramentus later. You don't need to farm this. It does have a farmable div card that is target farmable in SSF, but as someone who has tried to farm an Axophore, I would heavily recommend against doing that. Its drop rate is atrocious. Maybe it's not that bad if you have like, God, well, see, there's no quant gear anymore, so I'm not actually sure. God, it's probably even worse now. I actually had some quant gear. Anyways, okay, sorry, moving on. Crit build, we're going to have 100% uptime on this flask just because we hit a shit ton and it's going to give us a charge every time we do. Rock Cut does kind of compete with that, and as you guys know, big Rock Cut enjoyer. This should be relatively pretty easy just because we also hit very frequently and we have this 10% chance on mark effect. So that should be up as well. This will not be up 100% of the time. The Diamond Flask definitely should be. This Rose Thorn Tincture obviously will not be up 100% of the time. The reason I think this will have way higher uptime than normal is because I'm converting our, instead of like having 1% of our mana drain, which would be a fuck ton, right? Like, we do not have a super high life total. So this falling, like even after 50%, we can almost maintain that at like, like 20 mana burn stacks. Or yeah, it's like 25 mana burn stacks we can sustain. So we can actually have really high uptime on this if it goes on our life. We would have really high uptime if it went on our mana. The reason I don't want to do that is just because it's going to feel uncomfortable because most of our defense is coming from that and scaling other things. So I really would much prefer switching this to our life like I do here. Now, what really stinks is because of the positioning on the tree, we cannot get Claw Masteries. The Claw Masteries are super good for this build. Like a big one is 10% of leech is instant. This just gives you so much more mana leech, especially if you're like dual wielding. Like I just put on 2 of these here. Look at that instant mana leech. And then if you're dual wielding, you're also like, man, I really want that inherent attack speed from dual wielding is doubled, which is also like super good. As you can see, was it like 9% more damage? Surprised it should just be like 10% more. But anyways. All the Claw Masters are good. It's just unfortunate because to get to them, we would have to come all the way up here and up here. This one's just kind of bad. You can path this way and go like this because this leech node is actually good for you anyway. So this is like, actually, we should just do this, huh? Like we do this, 10% of leech is instant. Cut this, switch this to a tattoo for leech. Oh, it saves us no points. Son of a bitch. It's the exact same. Okay. Anyways. Ignore everything I just said. I could have swore that was going to save some points, but okay. The way I had it was perfect. I'm smart. I'm the best. You don't need any of these tattoos in particular on this. The reason I have these here are just like to finish our stun avoidance because we actually get a decent amount of stun. Just like because I would like to have you can multi-mod this on because like you really just want a nice evasion ES chest. Less damage taken per dexterity is huge. Obviously, we're stacking dexterity. And LE Ailment Avoidance and Stun because we are getting LE Ailment Avoidance over here. And Ailment effect on you, like getting applied to you, this is true as PoE 2 as well, gets applied based on your life total, which we do not have a super high life total, so we are going to get shocked and frozen a little bit more than I would like. We have way more life than like a normal big mana build, but still, I would rather try to get LE Ailment Avoidance and Stun since we already have some, and we path by like efficient sources of it. Much later on, you can get a Ancestral Vision to fix the rest of it. You can also do the same thing with, what is it called? Storm Shroud, and then you would use a belt like this, a Storm Shroud heavy belt with using a essence of, God, I forget what the essence is called. But anyways, you can use an essence to get a chance to avoid being shock guaranteed on a belt. and craft it like that. And then it's pretty easy to cover the rest of your resistances, or not your resistances, your ailments. There are a huge pile of Forbidden Flames and Fleshes for this build that are really good. I'm probably going to play HCSSF or Hardcore Trade, so these are going to be not super accessible by me. But for you guys, like extra projectiles off of Deadeye, Tailwind. This one I don't actually think is all that good, just because I think eventually you switch to Rare Boots with Tailwind and Elusive anyway. Focal Point, Mark Effect is very good for Venom Gyre because it's going to create more projectiles that split off of it. Expert Herbalist is the extra tincture. Tinctures are insane on attack builds just in general, and getting to use an extra one, like if you just like look at how much damage just one tincture is. Our second one's not going to be as good as this, but you know, it can probably still be like 30% more damage. So as you can imagine, it's quite worth an ascendancy point. I want to say that that's pretty much everything for the gear. The only thing I didn't really touch on much is the tree, and that's because, like I said, this is still kind of shit right now. I did not take time to find good nodes on any of these, but you would ideally get notables that are good with this, and you want this without any good notables at all, like immediately, like if you're SSF and you drop this, you just slot it in, and that's because it gives you a ton of dexterity, which in this build is defense and damage, because dexterity directly gets converted to mana. You cannot take, like, let's say, I just want to show you why I can't take this. We have so much dexterity, and dexterity gives you increased evasion rating. So this actually destroys our evasion, even though it would make our suppression super easy to get. I would rather try to get that from gear, because it's just going to mean we're going to get hit a ton. But something to keep in mind. You could use the trader, but the thing is, I actually want at least these three, and then I probably want a life and mana flask as well. So honestly, the trader is awesome, but I think it's a little uncomfortable, and we're getting so much power of these that I personally wouldn't drop them. You could obviously drop Rocket eventually. Like again, so like if we make this these rare pair, let me just show you guys the boots I'm talking about, because I've talked about them so much, but it's gonna be pretty straightforward. Probably don't use a hybrid base. It's way easier to make to use like a pure evasion base or pure ES. I guess in our case we want to use evasion boots, just because the suppression mastery. But so it's gonna be Redeemer and Hunter. Tailwind, and then Elusive of a Priest Fix, right? Yeah, so you can merge like another mod that you want down here with an Awakener's Orb, and then you can lock your suffixes, Reforge Crit to guarantee Elusive, and then from there you just craft on Movement Speed and Onslaught, and you have the fucking zoomiest boots known to man. Very easy to make. I have like six to eight pairs of these in my stash, just like a standard over the years, because of how simple these are to make and how powerful they are, just for really zooming. Yeah, I think that is everything for the character. Like I said, I think, like, I don't want to cover the tree too much, just because, like I said, it's kind of hastily thrown together. I just wanted to talk about the idea and getting to use all parts of the buffalo here, like not having to use fork. For the skills itself, I'm using Energy Leech here because, I guess I should go over the skill gems. But I'm using Energy Leech here because we have Instant Leech, so this is actually going to be pretty good at keeping our ES full. All of our damage is going to get dealt to our ES before it gets to our mana, so our ES is going to like get knocked down quite a bit, so I would like to have this. We would definitely have Ghost Dance if we could. It's just so far away we cannot get to it, because we have a ton of evasion. That's like, what, 170, so it's like 510. If we get hit, we would recover 510 ES, but like I said, can't actually get to it. It's just way too far away. You could eventually use, if you really wanted to, you could use a, what's it called, a Skin of the Loyal, but honestly, that chest is just not that good for us because we're not a spell build, so we don't get that much out of the levels. But and you could also cut another damage link if you would like for Chain. Chain feels really good, especially with like so it's going to be double chain, so projectiles are going to chain twice and then fork 3 times. It's going to really saturate the screen with Venom Gyres if you would like. But this is how I would plan to do it. Potentially dropping 1 for Chain when you're clearing. Nightblade is going to be about as good as Critical Strike support. The difference is it's just going to be really zoomy. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. We don't have room to take crit multi on the tree, which is why we're trying to take essentially crit strikes and crit damage here. And the reason for that is because claws have a really high inherent base crit, so it's pretty easy to go crit on them. But on big mana builds, like I discussed, you really can't afford to take a bunch of nodes like crit, because you really need to take mana for this like setup to actually be worth it. Which is why we're taking really efficient sources of crit, like this right here. And you could take this, would be one of the nice things about that pathing that I was doing earlier, is you get a path by lethality, which is quite good. I say that, and then it looks... We're crit capped? Holy shit. We really? Oh, it's because of this tincture. Okay, jeez. Man, talk about efficient crit. Jesus. I didn't realize we were crit capped. Oh my god. Okay. Okay. Anyways, but I guess lethality is a lot worse. Okay. There we go. There we go. It's much better. Okay. Okay. Fixed. All right. I think that's it. So trying to think if we covered everything. This is just preference. You get Grace is a lot more defensive, but honestly, I would just use haste. I love haste. I'm a huge haste enjoyer. If I get to get damage out of haste, I am going to use it pretty much. And that is also true in hardcore trade. I would rather have haste and zoom and die than live as a slug. So, okay, I think that's it. I want to talk about a Manaforged build next. So next build I want to talk about is Big Mana Manaforged Arrows. So this is not the a billion damage version that you're going to hear people talk about. That is going to be an Indigon version that is essentially abusing Indigon to increase the mana cost of your skills, which increases your spell damage due to Indigon. And then since the skills cost gets increased, Manaforged Arrow says support skills deal 1% more damage with hits and once per 1 mana cost. So it kind of creates this nice feedback loop where it increases the cost of your skills, which increases your spell damage, which increases the cost of skills, and so on and so forth. Until you have like really, really high, you've ramped a really, really high damage skill. The reason I'm not using this is because, well, people are going to work on that like really high budget version later, which is not usually my kind of thing. And Indigon is quite annoying to actually use because it just makes mapping kind of more tiresome. And this is a pretty difficult, unique to actually farm. The drop rate from Uber Elder on this is actually not that bad. It's really just farming shapers that I find very tiring because you have to deal with all the dialogue and you have to wait. It's just so much waiting. And on top of that, like even if you're playing something like Hardcore Trade, there are going to be very few of these exist. And then like the last time I wanted to get one, John Graham bought one and then immediately ripped it. So I was just like really salty because I really wanted one and there's just like not very few on the market. But anyways, long story short, hard to get unique. I'll let someone else handle that version. So we're dealing with a more low budget version. And honestly, for the most part, our version is really not using anything crazy expensive. So I'm going to discuss the build. I'll talk about my setup that I'm actually using to enable this because I think it is quite weird. And I haven't really found a better way to do this. So when you're playing a Manaforged build, a lot of times you want to use something like Scourge Arrow or like a channeled skill to trigger all your Manaforged setups because you don't want it to scale attack speed to proc your Manaforged setups. The problem, on a Manaforged Arrow setup that where you're scaling mana to the moon, it's very difficult to get a skill that costs enough mana to actually trigger your Manaforged setups consistently. And you don't want to have to get attack speed to like actually balloon the mana cost of those very high. So it kind of creates this like difficult to solve problem. Now, I'm doing something very weird. So when you summon a totem, the totem placement itself procs Manaforged checks. So totem placement time is very fast by default. I think it's like 0.3 seconds, which is like an incredibly fast attack time, like, you know, quote unquote attack. And totems can use like really high mana cost skills like Burning Arrow. And this doesn't scale the totem placement speed at all. So essentially our Manaforged triggers happen every 2.5 seconds. That is because we have 15% unveiled CDR on our belt and then 2% CDR from an Abyssal Jewel. You get like 17% on Shape Boots or whatever, but long story short, this breakpoint puts it at 2.5. So that means we need to, our Manaforged skills that we're triggering all cost around 100 mana. So that means every 2.5 seconds, we need to spend 300 mana on an attack. That's pretty much impossible to do in a single attack. So what you end up doing is having 2 attacks. Now, getting 5 attacks per second on a skill that costs 150 mana is going to be insanely difficult. However, getting 150 mana cost on a totem that you place 5 times a second is not that difficult. Like if you'll look here on our Manaforged Enabler, which is a totem, our totem placement time is 0.22 seconds. Ideally, we get this like 0.21 because you want it to have around like just like a little above 0.2, which is 5 placements a second because you want it to be a little bit higher than your trigger rate so you don't like whiff essentially. And how we're doing this is we're getting a ton of, we're using a artillery quiver because you don't get that much out of another quiver like truly anyway. Like we could use like a spike point for the crit chance. Like normally you get a ton of damage out of a quiver that's, what's it called? Like either LE damage with attacks implicit or the, like a, what's the other one? Feathered arrow quiver because you can convert the prod speed to damage with the bow mastery. But the thing is, we're getting all of our damage from our increased spell damage scaling, so those aren't good for us. So it's actually kind of free for us to use this artillery quiver. And since we're getting fork, we don't want a pierce quiver, so it kind of just works out really nice. I feel like I'm saying so way too many times. I apologize. But long story short, we're just doing that, and then we're picking up like a single totem placement speed node here, and then we're getting an additional totem placement speed from the quality on Ballista Totem support. Well, we would be, Initially, that's what I was doing. Okay, let's get even weirder. So I'm using shape boots that have socketed gems are supported by Ballista Totem and socketed gems are supported by Life Leech. Now, I really tried to find a way to not have to have it also be Life Leech, because that is going to be a huge pain in the ass for SSF gamers to actually get both of. But I could not figure out a way to get our mana cost high enough, because, for example, our totem placement costs us 148 mana, which if we do it twice, that's about 300, so it's enough to trigger all the Manaforged stuff. You just hold it down. You don't have to actually like mash the button. But if I drop Life Leech, like I can show you real quick, let's see. Our mana cost goes down to 135. That is 270 twice, which is not enough to proc our Manaforged setups. Now, pretty obnoxious, right? Maybe there's a better way to do this. If somebody can think of one, please let me know, because I was honestly struggling to solve this particular problem. One thing you can do, and I have done a little bit here, is lower the mana cost in some of your skills. Like my Storm Rain is lowered down to 15 because that's when it goes from 10 mana to 9, because otherwise it's just going to cost too much mana. Like this kind of stuff is a little annoying to actually set up. See, 103, that is very slightly more than 2 totem placements with my Burning Arrow Ballista Totem setup. That's why Caustic Arrow Poison is down to 17 here. The skills here don't really matter, so you can kind of just use whatever you want. So you should definitely use Storm Rain in some links with GMP, because it's just so much damage compared to other skills. But then you can use the rest. It's just kind of up to you. Like I'm using like Lightning Arrow and like Ice Shot here, I believe. Yeah, but you can use other stuff. Burning Arrow is really good damage. The problem with Burning Arrow and why we're using it with Ballista Totem support is it costs way too much mana. It's also very high damage, but so like for example, if I look here, Burning Arrow, see the trigger rate 1.6 because it is just way too mana intense, like 126 mana. So we need to spend, God, 378, which is just way too difficult. But the other skills like around 90 to 100 is fine. So that is why we're not using Burning Arrow, despite it being more damage than the other stuff. Now, I can also talk about, I guess this is mostly covered our gear. We do not have a lot of sockets left between this is in our bow, this is in our chest. Either or, it doesn't really matter where they are. This is in our boots, so that only leaves gloves, helmet, and a potentially unset ring left. So we are using Purity of Elements and Eternal Blessing. This is what you're going to use on big mana regardless. Purity of Elements because we are using a lot of uniques. Probably switch to Haste eventually or Grace. Probably Haste just because it's comfier. And then we have Mark on Hit, Snipe. That only leaves 4 sockets left. So we have a 3-link Arcane Cloak and then Frostblink as our literal last possible thing. The sockets are very tight in Manaforged setups because, again, you're using all this. You could potentially get around that by having like a Hungry Loop setup, but that's a whole other that's a whole other thing to get into. That's also pretty difficult to actually set up and practice, but something that I always consider Manaforged setups, but never end up actually using because it's a little too annoying to set up. Now, since we cannot use Wrathpith on this build, we need to get our increased spell damage from somewhere else, which is what we were getting with Doedger's Tenure. So as you can see, this is a ton of damage. You don't need this Frenzy Charge Implicit Corruption, but it is a decent amount of damage. It's literally just 4% more damage on this build because we do not scale off attack speed at all. So very, very not needed. I just have it here so people don't forget about it. Astromantis, again, you can switch to a rare eventually, or use a rare before you actually get it. Mind of the Council, very big for our damage. It's like 30%. Not as much as our Venom Gyre build, but still quite a bit. It's going to be pretty difficult to actually beat this, but you can definitely use a rare that just gives you mana, or honestly, I can't really think of anything else that would really make sense to me. Really probably just like a nice rare with like Fizz Taken As, and then a bunch of life and mana and dexterity. You could also use Black Sun Crest, but honestly, I don't like that as much because you don't really get that much damage out of it, and it's just kind of not as nice. Like I actually like all the ES we're getting from this because we can maintain it relatively well because on one of our Manaforged setups, that's why I have Energy Leech here again, just much like the Venom Gyre build. I have Energy Leech here, which is more free on this because our main damage skill does not need to waste to support on a 24% more. Like ideally you'd use elemental damage with attacks, which is a little bit more, but Energy Leech is just going to feel a little bit better at keeping you full. Now, other thing that we're doing that's really weird and really painful to get in SSF because these corruptions are very rare to get. You have to go through so many Cobalt Jewels. We're using Fevered Mind here. And if you look, Fevered Mind, about 50% more damage, right? Or I guess that's like 40% more damage. It says it right there, 49% more damage. And the reason this is so strong is because Manaforge, again, scales off the mana cost, and Fevered Mind transforms all the notables in Radius to be 10% increased mana cost and 20% increased spell damage. So we have 6 notables in radius, so that is 120% spell damage. Thanks to our ascendancy, that's multiplied by 1.5, so we have 180% increased damage off of this. And we are getting 60% increased mana cost of skills. So both of those make this just like an absurd amount of damage for this. Now, obviously, we're giving up a lot going to this spot on the tree, so you could maybe find... I couldn't really find a better spot for this. It's like possibly down here is not terrible, but that's also quite terrible. This is a very good spot for Healthy Mind, by the way, because you can convert this life to mana, you can convert this life to mana, and then mana's right here. Like these mana nodes are really good, these mana nodes are really good. So it's something to keep in mind. Duelist has a very weirdly good mana spot for Healthy Mind. And Healthy Mind's obviously very good up here as well, because you can convert this life to mana. But honestly, this one's better. This slot's also very good for Healthy Mind, because it converts this life, and then it converts this life. So yeah, that's thanks for coming to my Healthy Mind TED Talk. But and the same reason on the last build, we are not taking Mage Bane, because even though it'd be a really efficient source of spell suppression, the problem is it actually completely guts our evasion. As you can see, we lose half of our evasion rating because we're getting so much increased evasion rating from our like 800 dexterity. Same thing with Iron Will, tons of damage, 11% more out of this. Do I have increased my left mastery? Thought I did. Where did I get an extra point? I don't know what I did to screw up our build. The one thing that I'll say that I have here that is like this is not like super unleague start friendly. Like even our bow, like we really don't need all the mods that we have on it, because really just want crit chance and spell damage. Like use a deafening essence or a shrieking essence of woe, which is tier 2 what I have here, until you get like a decent lightning damage roll or decent crit chance, and then you either craft on pen or flat lightning or something like that. Honestly, you can also craft on. Ideally, we would have flat mana crafted on too, but you just kind of run out of prefixes. It's either pen or flat mana is probably the last one. But if you whiff, you really just need the spell damage and crit chance in another bow. Ideally, eventually you would get +2 arrows, because we are scaling single target off things that shotgun, like lightning arrow. Not lightning arrow. Where is it? Storm Rain. Oh, I have lightning arrow over here. Storm Rain and caustic arrow poison. You can use other skills. It's just this is what I would probably use. I would definitely use Storm Rain. The rest is pretty much up to you, especially on your clear setup. Storm Rain you should definitely use on single target, just because it's going to really help your damage. But outside of that, like our quiver, like I said, is just totem placement totem placement speed, additional arrows, and then crafted crit chance and frenzy charge, which is an unveil that you have to get. You could Manaforge a frenzy, but again, like I tried to harp on this. Our sockets are very, very tight. You could squeeze it in here and then lose the support over here as well to get a frenzy in, but that is a very steep cost, right? So try not to do that. Since we are getting frenzies when we attack, Rocket and Jory here, by the way, and then we are going to be critting very frequently because we're just hitting so much. This Diamond Flask will definitely be up like 99% of the time, even in bossing scenarios. The Rocket less so. That'll probably be up around half the time. But anyways, I think that's pretty much it for this. Honestly, this build, I'm pretty happy with like the package we have here. I think it's very cool. It'll be very fun. I am less sure on the exact ascendancies I'm taking here, because like I'm definitely taking an Infinite Pursuit, definitely taking this, and I am definitely taking your Mind is Destroyed. But the last one is kind of honestly up for grabs. It's probably like if we don't need the fork here and we want to grab Pierce, you could take this to get to Rage. Like you could get Rage from an implicit on rare gloves, but if you end up using something like Doedri's Tenure, it's actually quite difficult to get Rage. So I would probably, I mean, this is definitely going to be way more damage than this, but depends on how much this actually feels for your clear speed. So it doesn't scale your single target, obviously, so it's kind of up to you. It's like this is more single target, this is more clear. And then this is, so you can definitely do this. The thing is, it's just like kind of super not necessary. Do I have this configured incorrectly? I probably do on my clear. I do have power charge critical here. Yeah, so we're getting so much like utility supports out of this. Like you could get a little bit more damage by like dropping power charge on critical for like elemental damage with attacks here. It's like 5% more, as you see there. But the thing is, it's so easy on this build to automate frenzy charges and power charges that if you're doing the Manaforged bow setup, I don't think this is super necessary. It's a little bit better on something like Venom Gyre. Like if you don't want to have to take the Mark Mastery, and then you don't want to have to put like the power charge and be a little inconsistent because you have it in your Whirling Blades. So it makes more sense somewhere like this. But this, honestly, I just don't really think it's worth it. If you are not going to do 2 Manaforged trigger setups and you just can't fit in another 6-link, it's possible this makes more sense, because if you don't have room to fit in Manaforged Frenzy or power charge on crit, and then you can't get Frenzy on crit on your quiver for whatever reason, like you're using Unique. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this. I'm I cannot stress enough how excited I am for this Ascendancy in general. I don't know that I'm going to league start it. I'm probably going to league start one of the safer to play Ranger Ascendancies or something else, but I will definitely be playing this at some point. I cannot not do it. I love big mana. At least, I don't know what it is. I love big mana attacks. They're cool for spells. It's just, maybe it's because I'm such a hipster, I guess. I'm not sure. I don't know what's wrong with my brain. All right, Poops and Butts out.